Nora Dalmasso was a woman who seemed to have it all. She lived in a large, comfortable house in one of the most exclusive neighborhoods in Rio Cuarto, a quiet, prosperous city nestled in the heart of Argentina's agricultural plains. Her husband, Marcelo Macaron, was a respected doctor, a traumatologist. They had two beautiful children, a son and daughter, who were making their way in the world. To the outside observer, Nora's life was a portrait of upper-middle-class success. It was stable. It was secure. It was, from all appearances, perfect. But as we so often find, appearances can be deceiving, can't they? Deep beneath the surface of that tranquil life, currents were moving, secrets were kept, and a storm was gathering that no one saw coming. She was 51 years old, known for her elegance and her social grace. Friends described her as reserved but warm, a dedicated mother who doted on her children, Facundo Valentina. Her days were filled with the familiar rhythms of life in a tight-knit community, social gatherings, managing the household and supporting her husband's busy career. It was November 25, 2006, a warm Saturday evening in Rio Cuarto, the kind of evening that makes you want to go outside, hang out with friends, and enjoy the nice weather. Nora Dalmasso was doing just that. She had plans. She was going to a dinner party with some of her closest friends, something they did all the time. It was a night that started out normal, just like any other. People made phone calls, picked out clothes, and said hello. Nora talked to her daughter, Valentina, who was studying in the United States, and her son, Facundo, who was at college in Cordoba. Everything seemed normal, totally, completely normal. The dinner was at a friend's house. Everyone said the talk was light and happy. They were a group of women who had known each other for years, sharing stories and laughs over food and wine. People who saw Nora later said she seemed relaxed and in a good mood. There was no hint of trouble, no sign of the terrible thing that was only a few hours away. She left the party sometime after midnight, driving her own car back to her big empty house in Villa Golf. Her husband Marcelo was far away, enjoying a weekend golf game in Uruguay. Her kids were gone, the house would be quiet. Sunday morning arrived bright and clear, but a feeling of unease began to creep in. Nora, usually so reliable, wasn't answering her phone. Friends who had been with her the night before tried to reach her, with no success. A neighbor, a friend of the family, was asked to check on the house. He walked over, calling her name. The silence from within was unnerving. Finding a door unlocked, or perhaps a key left in a prearranged spot, the accounts vary, he stepped inside. The house was still, quiet. Too quiet. He made his way through the familiar rooms, a growing sense of dread with every step he took. And then, he opened the door to the master bedroom. What he saw in that room would be seared into his memory forever. It was a scene of startling, almost surreal horror. Nora Dalmasso was there in her daughter's bedroom, not her own. She was lying on the bed, naked, covered only by a robe. She was lifeless. The neighbor, reeling from the shock, immediately backed out of the room and called for help. The police were summoned. The paramedics arrived. But it was too late. Nora was gone. The news spread like wildfire, first through the neighborhood, then through the city, and finally, across the nation. In the vacuum of hard evidence, rumors began to fill the void. In a city like Rio Cuarto, whispers traveled fast. The initial shock gave way to intense speculation about Nora's private life. The image of the perfect wife and mother began to fracture. A more complex, scandalous narrative took hold. The media, local and national, descended upon the city. Friends, neighbors. Casual acquaintances were interviewed, their words were parsed for hidden meanings. The story became a public spectacle, a real-life soap opera for the nation. The whispers centered on one possibility: a secret lover. Was Nora involved in an extramarital affair? The idea took hold and refused to let go. It offered a simple motive where none seemed to exist. A crime of passion, perhaps? A jealous lover or a spurned one? Names surfaced, prominent men from elite circles. Each rumor added a thread to an ever-expanding web. Police chased leads, separating gossip from fact. It proved incredibly difficult in the town's supercharged atmosphere. It created a smokescreen, a fog of innuendo that may have obscured the path to truth. All eyes naturally turned to the husband. In cases like these, they almost always do. Marcelo Macaron, the successful traumatologist, was the man who seemingly had the most to lose, or perhaps the most to gain. But there was one significant problem with the theory that he was the killer: his alibi. On the weekend of his wife's murder, Marcelo was not in Rio Cuarto. He was approximately 700 kilometers away, Punta del Este, Uruguay, competing in a prestigious golf tournament. He had witnesses, dozens of them, friends, fellow golfers, tournament organizers. The alibi seemed solid, ironclad even. He had played golf on Saturday, had dinner with friends that evening, was preparing for the final day of the tournament on Sunday when he received the devastating news. His reaction, by all accounts, was one of profound shock and grief. He immediately chartered a private plane to fly back to Rio Cuarto, a distraught husband rushing home to a nightmare. On the surface, it was impossible. How could a man be in two countries at once? The timeline just didn't work. For Marcelo McCarran to have killed his wife, he would have had to perform a seemingly magical feat of travel, a round trip of 1,400 kilometers. Just when the case seemed to have stalled, it took a shocking and deeply personal turn. The focus of the investigation shifted dramatically, landing on someone no one had initially considered a serious suspect: Nora's own son, Facundo McCarran. In 2007, about a year after his mother's death, the 24-year-old law student was formally accused. The basis was a piece of forensic evidence found at the scene. Genetic material, a partial DNA profile, had been recovered from Nora's body and from the bathrobe belt used to strangle her. Prosecutors claimed this DNA was a match for Facundo. The accusation sent shockwaves through the family and the nation. The theory was that Facundo had traveled from his university in Cordoba to Rio Cuarto, a distance of about 200 kilometers. Prosecutors painted a dark picture, alleging he had confronted his mother, possibly arguing about her lifestyle, and that the confrontation had turned violent. The motive, they suggested, was a mix of rage and shame. For Facundo, the accusation was a nightmare. He insisted on his innocence, providing an alibi that he had been in Cordoba with friends the entire night. His friends backed him up, but the power of the DNA evidence seemed overwhelming. In 2012, he was officially cleared of all charges. So, while everyone was looking at the McCarran family, other ideas and suspects kept popping up and then disappearing. Each new one made the case even more confusing. One idea that stuck around for a while and seemed really promising was about a guy named Gaston Zarate. He was a house painter, just a regular working man who had done some jobs in the fancy Villa Golf neighborhood. The news people started calling him El Perejil, which means parsley, but it's also a way of saying someone is a scapegoat or a fall guy. Zarate was arrested and accused of the crime. The lawyers thought he tried to rob Nora and something went terribly wrong, but the case against Zarate looked pretty weak from the start. There was no real proof that he was even at the crime scene, just some shaky claims that he was somewhere nearby. A lot of people thought he was being set up, like he was an easy person to blame to take the heat off of more important and powerful people. The public really stood up for him. There were huge protests in Rio Cuarto, with thousands of people marching in the streets, demanding that he be let go. And it worked. The charges against Zarate were eventually dropped. Another idea pointed to someone much more powerful: a well-known politician, a businessman named Alberto El Gato Brizuela. Rumors said he was one of Nora's secret boyfriends, but just like so many other leads, this one eventually went nowhere. In 2022, nearly 16 years after Nora's death, the case finally went to trial. It was a moment the nation had been waiting for, a chance for answers, for justice. But it was a strange trial from the very beginning. There was only one person in the dock: the husband, Marcelo McCarran. He was not accused of committing the murder himself. His alibi in Uruguay was still considered too strong to overcome. Instead, he was charged with being the intellectual author, the mastermind who had allegedly hired a hitman to kill his wife. The motive, the prosecution argued, was a combination of financial disputes and fury over Nora's infidelity. The trial was a spectacle. For weeks, Argentinians were glued to the proceedings, listening to the dramatic testimony. Friends, family members, former suspects took the stand. The intimate details of Nora and Marcelo's marriage were laid bare for all to see. The prosecution painted a picture of a relationship in crisis, of a husband who felt humiliated and sought revenge. It was a case built almost entirely on circumstantial evidence and motive. The defense, however, methodically dismantled the prosecution's case. They argued that there was no proof of a hired killer. No phone calls, no money transfers, no mysterious figures linking Marcelo to the crime. Even Marcelo and Nora's own children, Facundo and Valentina, took the stand to defend their father. In the end, the jury agreed with the defense. He was acquitted. But it was a deeply unsatisfying one. If Marcelo didn't do it, and he didn't hire someone to do it, then who did? Nearly 19 years have passed since Nora Dalmasso was killed in her own home. The case is officially closed. Yet the story endures, lodged in the public consciousness of Argentina. The central question, of course, remains, who killed Nora Dalmasso? What do you think? Let us know your theories in the comments below. Like and subscribe for more deep dives. We'll see you next time.